All right. Hello, hello. Hey, everybody. Welcome. I think camera's in a different place today, so I have to say welcome. Figure out which camera I'm on here. Thanks, everybody, for showing up on this lovely Saturday afternoon, evening, depending on where you are in your world. But yeah, let's talk about what we're going to do today. So I was just moving cameras around so you can see we've got a whole other modular rig over here today, which is normally back behind me, but I moved it over here because I wanted to be able to sample some stuff into the Digitact for the live performance. So trying to capture some loops, some things that are difficult to do with certain modules because they take a bit longer to dial sounds in, and so they don't really lend themselves to live performance. But I want to be able to use those cool sounds in live performance as well as production and whatever else. So with something like this, what I'm doing is working with this modular system to be able to create interesting sounds and patterns that may take a little while to dial in, so they're not really kind of improvised live in the moment things. But once I get stuff dialed in that I really like, then I have things running through the, oh, you're hearing static. I'm sure it's because I have that plugged in. That should make it better. So having things running through the Digitact so that I can sample into here, and that way I can use those things that are a little bit more difficult to make, a little bit more difficult to create on the fly, and but that way I can still use them. So that's what we're going to talk about today: sampling in here, how we use that with the live stuff, the improvised stuff, and why I have this whole monster of a setup set up the way that it is right now. So let me know about the buzz right now. It should be better. It should have gone away, looks like, in the chat, but definitely let me know. It's a USB feedback from having the auxies plugged in here, because I was messing around and had the batteries drained down on me because I was messing around with them all day today. So yeah, so welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. It's going to be a little bit different today, so there's probably going to be a bunch more questions. We're not going over kind of the same rig that we've been doing, although that rig is here, and that's kind of why we have it set up like this, and I will go a little bit more into that in a minute. So yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop those in the chat. Let me know where you're watching from. As you guys know, I love wherever this is happening. While everybody kind of joins us, I'll do a quick little promo for the courses that I have available, because I have a new one that I think you guys might be interested in. If you haven't already taken the course, I got asked a bunch about doing a video only version, one that didn't include all of the group calls and the one-on-one lessons and things like that. So it's just self-paced video. So there's a video only version of the course available now, which is on the website. And then there's also pre-signups right now for the November cohort, because I'm not doing one in October because I'm going to be traveling, and didn't want to kind of commit to being able to be there for all the classes and stuff and then not be able to show up. So pre-sign up now. There's a discount now. If you use, I believe the discount we have going right now is Oxy 20. Because I just did an interview for Oxy 1, so I will include that in there. So if you include Oxy 20 in the when you check out, you get 20% off the sign up of either one of the courses. So go ahead and get those signed up now if you can. Yeah, I'd love to have you on there. And if I would obviously prefer that you guys did the full course. The full course includes a month's worth of twice weekly group calls where we go into much more detail than what's in the videos. There's a one-on-one lesson for an hour at some point during the month. Every week you can submit a 10-minute recording of you performing live, and I give you feedback via email. There is an online discussion forum group that is private, so it kind of keeps out all the spammers and all the shit posters and all that stuff. So yeah, that's the complete hardware performance system, and then there's the video hardware performance course. Both of those are available right now. So check those out on the website. There's a link in the description down below. It's circlelive.com/courses. I would love if you guys would sign up. It's trying to make this into more of a viable thing here. So definitely sign up if you can. The people who've done it have been loving it. I think a couple of them are in the chat right now, so you can feel free to ask them. Let's see what we have. Questions. Greetings. Double Oxy power. Yeah, this is my Oxy for traveling, for performance. And then the original one, which was the first one that I got years ago, is the one that I generally use in the studio. I'm keeping them separate so that I don't have to change the setup of this one to create these loops that we're creating in the modular today. So it's just being clocked. One is being clocked from the other, so that way it still works together. But yes, double Oxy one action. Let's see. Good evening. Hello. Did you get my email? I believe so. I haven't gotten to all my emails and stuff today, but I believe so. What happened to Coral? Coral is right there. So it is still in my my larger production case. What happened was I needed to make some space in my performance case when I added in these two modules down here. And basically the Coral was the module that I was using the least in this particular setup. So I pulled it out and put it back in here because I still love it. But I wanted to be able to use it where I could take some more time to dial sounds in and make those sounds and then sample those into the Digitakt. So that's kind of what we're doing here today as well. Oxy Meta tucked in there. Yes, the Meta is up here, which you may or may not be able to see. It's right on the edge of the case so that I can always get to it. It's kind of easy, handy, within reach there. But yeah, it's definitely right there. Let's see. Yes, we got the static sorted. Yes, USB is terrible for ground loops. I'm in the UK, assuming I'm using MIDI out from Oxy One. What's your MIDI interface for the modular? So I have a couple of different outs from the Oxy. So I have MIDI out from this Oxy going into the Oxy Split, which is right here. One of those outputs is going to the Digitakt, and the other output is going to the second Oxy. So it's clocking both of those, and it's also sequencing some stuff in the Digitakt from this Oxy one. It's just clocking the second one, and the second one I'm just using the 8CV and 8 gate outputs from that to go into the larger modular case for making the sounds that we are, the sounds that we're working on today. So that's how it is. I'm not using a MIDI interface for the modular other than the Oxy One. So yet another thing added to the list of the things the Oxy One does. You can clock it via MIDI, or you can send MIDI into it. You can send MIDI through it, and then you can do USB, not USB. You can do CV and gate out from it, and you can also do clock out from it. So I can MIDI clock it from other things, and then I can send out a CV clock if I want to. Into my setup, which I'm not right now because there's nothing that needs to be clocked in there other than the sequencer, which is in the Oxy One. So that one doesn't really matter. Let's see here. Hello. Oxy and community is amazing. Yes, it is. Manuel's awesome, and he's done a great job with this. And he's constantly improving, constantly doing updates, which is a ton of fun. And if you're interested, I did an interview with Oxy, so go over to their forum on their website, and there's the full interview that's in there about kind of how I'm using it, and some little words of wisdom about performing live. So check that out. Let's see, Northern Virginia here. After you show some sampling demos, could you address how you go about organizing the samples in the Digitact so you can find what you're looking for later? Yes, I will talk about that because it's actually something I've been working on this week. I will show you. These are my notes for what I was doing to organize the Digitact. Because again, with a lot of gear, at least the gear that I really enjoy, there's a lot of flexibility with it as far as how you use it. Some gear has a specific workflow. You have to do it that way. And if you don't, it doesn't work. So you have to adapt yourself to the workflow. One of the things that I love about the Digitact, the Oxy, and some other pieces of gear that I use is that you can really customize it to yourself and the way you want to use it. So because of that, it's everybody has to kind of come up with their own system. There's not like one file system that you have to stick to. And especially since the Digitact 2 came out, it's got a totally new sample organization system because it used to only have 128 samples per project. Now there are 8 banks of 128, so there's over 1,000 samples per project. So to be able to organize those so you can find what you're looking for can be an interesting challenge. So yeah, so I've been coming up with a bunch of different ways. I'm trying out different ways right now. I don't have it set yet, but yeah, I'm trying out a bunch of different ways to organize this at the moment. So I will chat about those as we go on today. What's up, James? Welcome, welcome. Does the Oxy one have slew glide? Yes, it does have glide, which obviously is very handy. It's, yeah, you've got, you're able to program in all kinds of stuff. I mean, basically anything that you can think of from pretty much any sequencer, they've built into the Oxy One. It kind of took the best of everything that's out there and kind of shoved them all into this in a workflow that is, again, super customizable. So for example, each one of the 4 sequencers can be any one of 6 different types of sequencers. I only ever really use the multi and the mono because that lends itself really well to what I do. And so what I love is that I can make whichever one. So right now, sequencer 1 is a multi, so I've got drums and percussion and a few voices. And then 2 is a mono, 3 is a mono, 4 is a mono, so that I can actually kind of see what those look like when I'm doing stuff, rather than having it just be just a row of sequencer like you would find kind of in a 909 or an Electron or whatever. So I can set it up any way I want. If I want one to be a chord sequencer, if I want one to be polyphonic, if I want one to be stochastic or matricial, there's all different kinds of sequencers. So whatever works best for you, you can set up whichever channels you want. And then you can save that as a project. And then you can save a total other configuration as another project. So, you know, if you, let's say you're using it one way when you're performing, so you can set that up as a performance project. But then if you want to use it another way to maybe, I don't know, control Ableton, for example, via USB, well, then you can set up an Ableton project template. And so that when you turn it on, you open it up and you've got everything already pre-routed and set up to go to Ableton. So it's pretty handy. Let's see here. Digitact 2 and external sequencer is a tough nut to crack. No way, dude. I'll show you how to do it. Yeah, so basically, the way I'm using the Digitact 2, 1 through 8 are drums and percussion that are all sequenced internally inside the Digitact. I'd like to be able to use the sequencers inside there to be able to do, you know, probabilities and fills and all kinds of stuff like that. So I sequence that internally in the Digitact. Then 9 through 12 are one-shot samples. So let's see here. So those are all one-shot samples, and those are being sequenced here from the Oxy One. So what's cool is that with the Oxy One, you can set it up so that you can send out each row or each sequencer on a different channel. So 1 is going out via CV to the battering ram. Channel 2 is going out via MIDI to a tom sample in the Digitact. Channel 3 and 4 are going out via CV to the Archer's rig. And then 9 through 12, as I have them labeled, but it's actually 5 through 8, but I labeled them 9 through 12 because that's going to 9, 10, 11, and 12 in the Digitact. So that way, if I want to have something, turn this down, see what we got going on here. So this top pitch that you hear is being sequenced over here. So you see the sequence there, and then you see it lights up as it goes by here. So this is sequencing track 12. So then I have within track 12, I still have my same, controls in here because the voice is here. So the sample is over here. So I can set that up. I can add effects. I can do. Right, I've got bit reduction, sample rate reduction, all kinds of good stuff. So it just gives you the opportunity to sequence everything in one place so you can see it visually. Also, the Oxy is really good about keeping things in key and generating random notes in key, which the Electrons can't do. And so being able to sequence from here when you're doing melodic stuff is really cool. So that's why it's handy so that you can send out some via CV, some via MIDI, and you don't have to necessarily worry about it. Then if you've got modules, for example, like the Choral that operates off of MIDI or CV, you could make one multi-track, all 8 channels be the 8 voices in the Choral. So you can sequence each one of them separately, and basically that becomes an entire live set if you wanted to do it that way. So yeah, so it's not too complicated to sequence one from the other, especially the way the Oxy's set up. I mean, you just hold down the number of the sequencer that you're on and then select a channel, you know, so like select this channel. It says right here in the window 8A because it's going out on MIDI group A, track 8, because it's going to sequencer number 8 over here. And you can change that up really easily, send it to another track if you want to. You can even change that really quickly during a performance. So if you wanted to send a pattern to something different really quick and have it change up, you can do that live on the fly. So it's very, very, very handy. Let's see here. Surprisingly, a lot of sequencers don't have a glide. Yes, that's true. Surprisingly, they don't. A lot of sequencers, you know, it's funny, sequencers, I think Electron really kind of pushed, Electron and also Circlon, they did a really good job of kind of pushing the envelope on sequencers and getting away from that kind of traditional, you know, 16 steps sequencer or like the SH101 style or Minilog style of step sequencing. And they got it into something where you can actually do things per step and lock and make changes per step, which is really cool. And then you've got things like the Oxy, the Torso T1, the Hapax, where they kind of took it to another level to be able to come up with random things, generate stuff, keeping things in key, doing slides, doing stuff like that. So there's been a lot of advances over the last 5 years in sequencers, and you know, lucky for us that no matter what your workflow preferences are, there is probably a sequencer out there that will be perfect for you. So it's kind of handy. Find the one that works the best for your workflow, and yeah, use that one. Let's see. All right. Looks like that's it for the questions for now. Feel free to pop any questions you want into the chat, anything about the gear or anything like that. And then what we'll do right now is I think we're going to switch up the views so we can talk a little bit about what we're doing over here and how we're kind of getting that into the Digitact. So basically, the only mixer that I have in the big case right now is just this little, it's basically a 4 stereo channel Bafaco mixer over here. And the main outs from that, which you see here, are going under the case and into the back of the Digitact. Let me see if I can get a different view here so you can see both things. You don't have to look at me anymore. sec. Change up the view. There you go. So now you can have the overhead and the, yeah. So again, coming out of here and then going into the back of the Digitact, and then I have that on the input channel. There's a left and right input channel, so it has its own effects in here, and then it runs through that. The Digitact output goes into the mix in of the W&D Performance Mixer, so that way it goes through Master Effects, which is the Oxy Meta. So that way everything kind of has its flow of where it's going. So yeah, so that's how it's all coming into here. Now, what I'm doing over on this side, and the reason why I'm using the big monster is because I have certain voices, oscillators, things like that, which I really love the sound of, but either they're too big or they're too time consuming to dial in to fit into my travel case that I use for live performance. So I didn't want to not be able to use all those great voices. So I have things like, for example, the Odessa here, which is what I'm using right now. There's the DPO. I've got the Oxy Coral in here. I have an Erica Synths Black Wavetable VCO. I have a couple of Platts clones, all of that, plus a bunch of different modulation, plus a bunch of effects. And especially larger effects, like you see like the Starlab or like the Soma Lyra effects, they're way too big to fit into a small case, but they sound really cool. And so this is a way to be able to use that stuff, but not have to haul it around, is to record in. And so the reason why I'm doing it this way, where I moved the case over here and I'm sampling stuff in with my live rig separate from it, is because I wanted to be able to use the live rig in the way that I'll use it, and that will inspire ideas that I'll generate in the modular. So for example, if I just get started here, so like I can use my regular kick that I would use, so that way I can get that feel for that kick with whatever I'm doing here. I've got things like my basses that I like to use, like the pizza. And I can basically take things that I will be using in performance and mix them with things that are coming from the case. So right now I have a sequence that's coming from the other Oxy one, and it's going into the Odessa. The Odessa has 3 outputs. What it does is it's an additive synth, and so it basically adds harmonics to things, and it's kind of like wave shaping or wave folding, but it's actually just adding in harmonics. And then it splits those harmonics. So the odd ones it puts on one channel, and the even ones it puts on another channel. And because of that, because it's kind of switched up the odd and even, it gives you those two as separate outputs, because you can do different things with them and process them differently. Then you have a third output, which is the fundamental, so the main fundamental note that you're playing. And then I'm taking all 3 of those and they're going into this little 2 HP mixer right here, so that I can blend those sounds together into the sound shape that I like. In order to create this. So if I bring this up, I'll take the effects off it so you can hear it dry. So this is just coming from the Odessa, but it's the 3 different outputs from the Odessa. And so what I can do is I can use the mixer to change that up, and I can add and then as I move things, so again, as you can see, it takes a while to dial in sounds with this. It's not like you can just quick turn of the knob and have something great, which is That's kind of a characteristic I look for in modules that I put into my performance case, are things that I have a huge amount of variety, but it's really easy to dial them in and have them sound really cool. Where with this, I have a huge amount of variety. It's maybe not as easy to dial it in, but I can get some unique sounds that I can't get otherwise. And so that's why I'll take some time and bring those in or dial those in the way I want them to, and then I'll bring those into the Digitact and sample those into here. So that way I can recreate that later on when I play live. And there's a couple things that I do that we'll talk about, a couple different ways that I like to sample things in, depending on how I think I would use that. So again, I'll bring some effects back on this so you can kind of hear. So getting a sound dialed in for me first starts with exactly what we were just looking at. So dialing in something that's kind of close to what I think I want to use. Then I'm going to kind of think backwards and say, okay, do I want to use this exactly this way and have it modulated in here, play a longer sample and have that sample be modulated in the recording? Or do I want to kind of open it up and save myself the option later to be able to do stuff within the sampler? And so, for example, with this one, I didn't show you, this is also going through a low pass gate over here, and that sounds like so you can see there's a lot of different variation that you can get from this. Now, if I want to keep some ability to modulate this within the sampler, I might want to leave open some of these parameters. So rather than closing down a filter or shortening up an envelope to get it to be really snappy and tight, I might record it much broader. So open this up. So I might record it in something like this. So then once it gets into the machine, I can shorten up things. I can close filters down. I can shorten envelopes and get sounds more like this. So that's one option. A second option is I can connect modulation to this, which I'll just chuck a few things on here. So I can just send some modulation into these. So you can see you can build in modulation and then sample it in that way. And that would be something that's more like taking a longer sample. It's still sending stuff in, interestingly enough. That'll be something that I would use more as a longer sample, where I wouldn't really modulate it myself. I would kind of let it go through its waves of modulation rather than me trying to dial it in and play it live, where I will be playing all the stuff that's in my performance case live, because that I don't have any modulation set up in that. So for that, it's all kind of modulation by hand. But sometimes you want something that does play a bit longer and that modulates over time. So it's cool to do things like that from a sample like this. Now, how do I sample this in? So basically, let me flip this back to this view so you can see. So once that comes into the Digitact, really easy with the Digitact, you just hit sample and that takes you to this. You have a couple different options. You can set, if you want it to be post-mix, pre-mix, you can say if you want it to be armed and sequence when it passes a threshold, or you can just hit yes and hit record, which is what I generally do. I'll generally record 128 steps. I'll hit yes when I want it to record, and then I'll go in and just dial it in so that it's exactly the right length for what I want to use. So for example, if I was going to record something like this, I would just go ahead. I usually use a kick as a metronome. So that way it kind of lets me know when I should start my beat. So when you hit yes, it's now recording in. Now that's done recording in. Now I can turn that down, turn the kick back off. So now it gives you a couple things. You can hit yes to save, you can hit function N to delete, or function yes to preview it. So I have that channel turned down a little bit. That's why the volume's not quite the same, but it does record at unity volume if you set that all the way at 127 when it's coming in. So then if I decide I want to save it, I just hit yes. It asks you what you want to call it. Then you go through the super fun thing of doing the Electron way to name stuff. I'm just going to name that really quick. And then you hit yes, and then it says it's saving. Once it saves, it's going to ask you if you want to put it onto a pad. So which track would you like to put that onto? As soon as you decide you want to put it on a track, let's say we want to put it on 13. So now that's on 13, and then you just hit function N, it deletes the buffer. So now there's nothing in that buffer, but that sample is now on track 13, which I already have a bunch of stuff on. So take off the bit reduction and all of the effects and the overdrive, and filter that back to normal, make the amp envelope long, and now we've got that on here. So now that's on that track, and that can be used however we want. So because we recorded it wide open, I can do I can do things like filtering it. So let's say I want to filter that way down. I could do or I can swap it out and use a high pass filter and filter it way up. Right? So it allows us the freedom to do some stuff once it's in the box. Then we also have things like effects. So we pulled those off when we were recording it. So now, for example, if I wanted to do this, to make it broader, right? So you get all kinds of options with it that way. Very quick to be able to put into here. One thing that I did already have set up on channel 13, which on track 13, which I will show you, is if you go to the machine page, it's set up on the stretch which is basically the time stretcher for longer samples, which is new in the Digitac 2. And by putting that on the stretch, then it gives you some options when you're in the source sample mode. The first one is the number of bars, and this takes a minute because you have to make sure that you tell it exactly how many bars your sample is, and your sample has to be exactly that number of bars. Because if it's not, if it's off by a tiny little bit, what this does, it's not a real true time stretch. So what it's doing is it's dividing up that thing into 8 segments, and it's stretching the individual segments. So it's making it, it's not stretching the entire wave. It's just stretching the segments. So if it's slightly off, you'll get aliasing right away as soon as you move 1 BPM off of your original BPM. So make sure that you're recording in exactly the right number of bars. It's one of the reasons why I like to record directly into the Digitac and not pull in samples from other places, because they may be slightly off, where with this, I know it's recorded exactly that because I set that as the parameter at the beginning. And then I can go in and I can change things. So I can shorten that to 4 bars, and I can go into the sample and I can make the sample length. So it starts out at 120. So I can make the sample length 60 exactly. And then if I want to change around the start point, it will still keep it that same 4-bar length and move around the start point. So if I want to, so I can start it from here, or I can start it from somewhere different. So you can move that around if you didn't hit it exactly on the start. It's a great way to do that. So I always record the longest length possible, and then I'll shorten it up if I want it to be a shorter sample. Otherwise, if it's really important that I get a 128 step sample, I'll just use the version of the sampler where you put a threshold and then you hit play, and it'll start exactly as soon as it crosses the threshold and stop after the set amount of bars that you did. So you're sure that you always get it that way. I'm usually doing this on the fly, so a lot of times I'm just hitting the yes to start sampling thing rather than trying to do it with the setup. So yeah, so that's the way that I'm getting stuff into here. Now that said, there are a bunch of different things. So what did I have here? I'll just start to load in some stuff and see what this does. So as you change the number of bars, you see it changes up the length of the sample. So I have other samples that I've already made from the modular that I've loaded in here. So this was something that I did earlier. This is another one. And another one. So now being able to have those in when I'm getting to the point where I'm going to perform something, taking all of this out of it now, all of the big modular case out of this now. So if I'm just performing from here, and then let's say I want to bring in one of those samples, I can mix that in using the mixer and fade that in. Bring in another one. there how all of those different samples kind of get incorporated into other stuff. So you can use them as different layers or play along with them. Or if you need a moment, depending on how you have your live setup organized, if you need a moment to be able to write and create something new on your sequencer or on your machines that you're improvising on, it gives you a great opportunity to be able to run things and have them go on their own to buy you some time. I also tend to use this as a lot of kind of background atmospheric stuff. So for example, if we just take that one that we just made and we filter that way up and then add in a whole bunch of reverb and some delay, and maybe we reduce the bits and reduce the sample rate, then this can be something that's more in the background. I'm gonna add in some more triggers for this one. Out of there for a sec. So to be able to have something like this as kind of a background to other stuff that you're doing is a way for, there we go. So again, using the sample rather than just having the sample play like normal. This can just be something going on in the background to add interest to what you're doing rather than having it be kind of a primary sound like what it was when we first recorded it. So then to just be able to bring in things like repurposing a sample that was recorded as kind of something dramatic that might be a lead sound, but you can filter it, you can add effects and turn it into kind of an atmospheric thing, more of a wash that goes on in the background. So there's all kinds of ways to use this stuff. And that's why when I do sample in from the modular, I like to sample in a way that I keep a lot of flexibility with what I'm doing. Unless I come up with something that I really love, like a whole pattern and how it evolves, then I'll record it just as it is. And I'll plan to make that, you know, if I use it, I'll use it in a way that it was recorded. But generally, I'm using the modular as like a sound source, and I'm sampling in patterns and sounds that I want to keep flexibility to be able to work with and use as tools for building tracks live. So let's go back over here to the chat. If you have any questions, chuck them in the chat, and happy to answer anything about anything today. Let's see here. Wielding unnatural power, yeah. The mixer and what you think about the new models. So the WMD Performance Mixer, the Mark II. Cool, I'll talk about that in just a sec, actually. Hey, Paul, what's going on? Good to see you. First sequencer was an Alesis MMT8. Nice. Way back in the day. Hello, hello. I have Analog Rhythm Mark II, Analog 4 Mark II, Syntac Digatone. Would the Digitac 2 be worth it as a main brain, or would something else be better for main jamming sequencer? So I wouldn't say the Digitac 2 would be great as your main sequencer, because it's the same sequencer more or less that you already have in all of your other machines. Electron basically is a sequencer company, and then they attach things to it. So this sequencer is pretty much just like the sequencer on your other boxes. It does have a couple little things. It has the Euclidean sequencer, which the Analog Rhythm Mark II has now that the new update's out. But yeah, as far as a sequencer goes, I wouldn't say that it's probably super valuable for you. As a sampler and as a sample player, incredibly valuable. Being able to sample in stereo, being able to have a lot more sample slots and longer samples is really, really helpful. Having 16 tracks that you can use for samples gives you a lot for sound sources. So for example, I before was using Rhythm, Digitact, and Syntact. So Rhythm was drums, and Digitact was more percussion, and Syntact was, I was using it as like 12 voices. Since I got that, I've scaled everything down to the Digitact 2 because I've got 16 tracks, so I can still use 8 for drums and percussion. And I moved over my kick into my modular. So I don't need that in the box anymore. So it just freed up a lot of space, and it allowed me to carry a lot fewer boxes when I travel. So as far as a sequencer goes, I wouldn't say the Digitact is probably your best move. You might want to do something that's a standalone sequencer like the Oxy 1, the Hapax, the Torso T1, whatever kind of works best with your workflow. I'm obviously partial to the Oxy, but it's not, you know, some people gel better with other workflows. But as a standalone machine that does a huge amount of stuff, Digitac 2 is wildly powerful. It's a great machine. So yeah, it depends on what you're looking for. If it's a sequencer, not this one. I would say go for a more dedicated sequencer. Hey Ed, what's going on? Ed, we were just talking about you on the call this morning. You weren't there. We were like, man, we haven't seen Ed forever. So join back in the Saturday morning calls. We have if you're one of my patrons there's a level where we have every Saturday morning, we have just a group call for an hour where we shoot the breeze, talk about stuff, talk about new gear, go over setups, you know, answer questions, all that kind of stuff. And it's tons of fun. So if you're into that, sign up for Patreon. Let's see. Any way to sample single cycle style? I don't think you can sample single cycle style, but I think you could shorten up the length. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, I could shorten up the length of something to be so this is this sample. But if I shorten it up, I can shorten it all the way up to where it's this. Find a good spot like there, so I could get that to cycle. It doesn't have it basically says the length is 0, so I'm guessing that's a single cycle, but I haven't really messed with that before. So yeah, not sure. Worth a try though. Not using the black box much these days. I am not. Actually, now that the Digitac 2 does time stretching, that eliminated me carrying that box with me. Although I have thought about bringing it back for some even longer samples, because this doesn't do great with anything that's over 8 bars. So bringing in something that is that deals with that longer length of sample better. So I may bring it back. I'm not sure. I still have it. I love it. But the great thing with the Digitac 2 is it allowed me to eliminate the black box, the Digitac 1, and the Syntact all from my setup. So I took out 3 boxes and replaced it with 1 box. So for traveling and getting on a plane, and like I'm going to Europe next month for some shows, hauling things around is a pain when you have a lot of extra boxes, particularly when you want to carry it all in hand luggage. So scaling down like this has been amazing. So yeah, let's see here. Love the way the Digitac 2 has the effects on the one page now. Yeah, it's cool. The only thing I miss with that is when the overdrive was on a different page, it had the volume on it. So as you drove up the overdrive, you could reduce down the volume so that you could gain stage and keep your volume the same amount while getting drive. So now you have to do like drive, go to another page, take it down, add more drive, and you're bouncing back and forth. That's the only one that's less functional for me. Other than that, having everything else on one page is great, and the addition of the chorus has been great too. But yeah, it was definitely an upgrade. Hey Mark, how does the Digitac effect stand up with dedicated stuff like pedals, etc.? You know, the pedals and I mean effects in general, it's such a personal preference thing that I don't know. I'm way less picky with things like that than some people are, because the style of music I'm doing it's gritty and noisy and wave folded and distorted, and so that these like clean, pristine, beautiful sounds are not a high priority for me. So I'm great with, you know, whatever effects. But that said, the ones in the Digitac are pretty solid. It's a huge upgrade from the old Electron effects, like the ones that were in the Octatrack. They're send effects, so they're not, you know, obviously a pedal, you could have it be an insert, you can have it be wherever you want. With these, they're send effects, so you lose a little bit of flexibility there. But sound-wise, they're pretty great. I'm actually a huge fan of the sounds. We can try here. Like if I go to a track like this is a clean sound. Here, I'll make it totally clean so you can hear the delay. And again, you've got control over all the parameters. Here's the reverb. And when you go into the send effects setup, you can set up the reverb with, it's got filters, so you can kind of high pass, low pass, you can move those around and choose the bands that you want. And then you also have a shelving gain for that. And then obviously you can adjust the decay and pre-delay. So you see, you can get it, and you can set it to infinite if that's important to you. So you can just let your reverb reverberate on and on and on. Or you can bring it back down to a normal manageable amount. Yeah, so quite a bit of control over them. We didn't do the chorus, so I'll pull the reverb off. And again, the chorus, you have a decent amount of control over that as far as like the depth, the speed, and the width. Make it narrower, wider. And then within the sends of these, it's pretty cool that you can you can send the chorus through the delay and reverb from within the chorus setup page. And then you can send the delay through the reverb from within the setup page. So it's cool that you kind of set your effects the way you like them. And then you've always got those as your send effects for everything that's in the machine. And that includes, as somebody mentioned before, that includes the left and right inputs. So you can do it as a stereo pair or as two monos. And even if you do it as two monos, each one of the mono channels has all of the send effects individually. So you can send in different synths through it and have those affected using the synths in here or using the effects in here. So it's, like I said, it's really, I think they're great. They're super functional. They don't have a ton of character. So if you want character, that's why, like in my modular case, I have things like the Star Lab and things like that have really cool character that you can use them for. But if you just need a, nuts and bolts kind of delay and reverb, they're solid. They sound really great. I love them. And you're welcome for the live feed. Let's see. Nice bass drum. Is a module or a sample? It is a module. So I basically have, make sure I've got everything else turned down here. I don't have everything else turned down here. I had the sample still playing. So the kick module is right here in my case. It's the battering ram from Shock Modular. So that's the kick by itself. Has a ton of adjustment as far as has two different drive circuits. So that's the max of the drive 1, and then this is drive 2. And then obviously you can tune it. So you see you get a lot of different variety out of this kick module, which is why I decided to put a kick in there. I had never used drums in my modular case prior to this because I never found ones that I liked. I always preferred using either hardware boxes, drum machines, samplers, whatever. And then this one blew me away. It's for me, it's the best sounding kick I've ever heard. So that's why I put it in there. But I've also got, if we mute that one, I've also got a kick in here, which I can change up the filter on. And it probably sounds familiar because it's a sample of that kick. So I like that kick so much that I sampled it into here and have it as kind of a second kick or backup or something that I can do. That's why it was filtered way down there, because I can go in and I can sequence like offbeat kicks on this one and have it do with the other kick. And have it add some groove to it. And I love the fact that it's the exact same kick, so I know I'm gonna get the same character. And if I don't want that exact same character, then I just don't use that one. And I have a tom set up over here, which is this tom. And I have that set up to sequence from here. So I can get that same kind of cool groove with either way, whichever I choose to do. So I can make it really super complicated if I want to. Not sure why I would ever want to do that, but. So that's two of the same kick, one a module, one a sample, and then I think it's a 909 tom sample, pitched down and filtered down, so get all that stuff going. And then you can add in some kind of traditional hats or ride. And then you can bring in some percussion. Or we can bring in one of those cool samples we were doing before. So anyway, so you can see how you can quickly build something with samples, modular, longer samples, one shots, sequencing from here, sequencing internally. So basically like back to what I started with at the beginning of this, the idea that you can modify and set up and kind of configure the gear any way you want to makes a lot of this gear that I've chosen to use really fun. That's one of the reasons why I chose what I chose to use in performance. Sorry, because it allows me to be flexible. So with the Digitech, for example, being able to have those things sequenced within here, using things like for example, having like a clap that I can use in here, but that I can already have sequenced in fills. Right? Most of you know that I don't love claps, but it's fun to have as like a dramatic effect sometime. So being able to put stuff like that and sequence that within the Digitact, and then being able to use things like the fills in a live performance is a lot of fun. Also being able to kind of control the individual things. If you notice on a lot of those sounds, like for example with the longer samples, let's see here. Yeah, like with a sample like this one, you hear there's some movement in the filter. So you see there's a bunch of movement in the filter with this one, and that's because another cool thing with the Digitact 2 is that you've got 3 LFOs per track. And so just being able to have those LFOs to play around with and use for individual things like that. So if you've got a long sample playing, using it for some movement and letting it go, so you don't have to do all that movement by hand. I like to do that with the knob per function in the performance case, but in here, you have to change pages if you want to do multiple things at once. So sometimes if there's something that I like to be able to just leave and let it play on its own, I'll slap an LFO on it and have it continue going that way. So yeah, ways to combine and kind of use everything. Let's see what we've got here. Greetings, Buzzy. Mark, depends on what your pedals are like. Maris pedals, no way. Some 80-ish guitar pedals, sure, but the electrons effects are the same. Yeah, they all of the modern machines all have the same effects. Although they basically had to redo them a bunch with Digitact 2 because it's a totally new chipset. So they rewrote everything from scratch from that. So they do sound slightly different with this one. I think they cleaned things up a lot, made them sound really nice. And but yeah, they are what they are. There's not a ton of character for sure. 80s-ish. Price and not year. Yeah, pedals from the 80s, man. My old Boss, my orange Boss distortion stomp box for my guitar from back in the 80s. I totally remember that. but yeah, and like I say all the time on these streams, it's really up to you and your preferences for the way you want to play, the style you want to do, what type of music, how hands-on you want to be. Do you want it to be, do you want things to be pre-prepared? Do you want things to be improvised on the fly? What kind of combination of those do you want? A lot of people are making basically completed tracks and then disassembling them so that they can reassemble them live, and they leave in there some space for themselves to jam. So they maybe would have one track that doesn't have a sequence on it, that is attached to a keyboard, and then you can play keyboard along with it if you're a keyboard player. So there's all different kinds of ways to do this. My method is very improvisational. The course I teach is all about the improvisational side of performance. And it's really because when I go up there to perform, I blank out my sequencers and I really start from scratch when it's time to perform. So like if I was to go in here and delete out all of these kind of melodic sequencer parts, I usually leave the drum stuff because it's just a waste of time to go back in and program the same drum stuff that you know you're going to use. But to be able to go in and just take out anything that is kind of melodic and then get started with something like those cool drums from before. And we'll keep it like groovy and primal. But then let's say we wanted to use some of the voices that are in here instead of the voices that are here. Well, then I can start to add those in, and I can put in that tone that I had before. If I want to add in something that's like a call and response, I can put something on every other, so every 2 bars. Sequencers that's in here, I can go in and let's say I want to do something on the Erickson's bass line, do like just like a rolling bass. Well, there we go. There was that jam. Sorry, got totally off in the weeds for a moment, but fortunately, I'm back to the world. Any questions or comments or any of that stuff? Sorry about the buzz that's going to come back in here, but I do need to plug this back in because if you didn't notice, my battery just died on the Oxy. So that is one of the reasons why that had to stop. Unfortunately, it would have kept going for a while. Let's see, what do we got here? Haven't used hats much and still a vibe. Yeah, it's if you get enough groove going with your low end, you don't need as much to kind of make it bouncy with the high end, and then you can kind of use those little bits as much as you want to use those little bits in order to emphasize the upbeat and make it bouncier. So a great way to get the energy up and flowing as you go. Let's see. End of chain glue is the ghost module or something else. So the ghost module is on a send. It's sending out pre-fader on in differing. I mean, I can switch back and forth on which send it is, and so it's sending out pre-fader. So I don't have to have an original sound coming through in order to make that happen. So let's do. So if I've got, let's say, the pizza. If I have the pizza doing this sound and I want to send it pre-fader to the ghost, I'm going to basically turn everything else down so nothing else is sending to it. I can take that out and it's still going into the ghost, which is returning into this channel. And then the ghost is delay, reverb, filter, compressor, overdrive, distortion, all in one pedal. So I use it like as a chain. And then I can, if I turn up the resonance on the filter, you hear how it will, like, the resonant peak will pick out certain frequencies and it sounds like a new instrument came in, but it's not. And what's cool about having it on a send is that I can send different things to it. So like, for example, that is the pizza going to it, but I've also got this hat. Find a different sound here. So I can also send that one. And where it gets really interesting is when you send both, but without having any of the original sound in. So. So you can hear how there's bits and pieces of both of them without having the original sounds in at all. So then you can bring in the dry sound if you want. Or you can just change those sounds up. So all of that's going into the ghost in differing amounts, however much I dial up the aux send to send out there, and then whatever I choose to do with it on the other end. So what it ends up doing is it gives you some really cool kind of washes and background sounds and atmospheres without having to have those as a separate instrument or sample loop or whatever. And you know it's always going to go with whatever you're playing because it's being made up of the parts that you're already playing. And you can do it in differing amounts too. So like if you just want to bring in a tiny little bit, That's just a tiny little bit of the bass sound. Right, so it sounds cool, atmospheric, and then when you bring in the sound itself, they go together, obviously, because they're coming from the same thing. So. So that's just the Archer's Rig module, but if I want to send some of that now into the Ghost, so now it may not be picking up those frequencies, but now when I start to move the frequencies, simple sounds, you can create a whole soundscape, and then you can add in those groovy drums. And this is what James was saying before, you don't really need the hi-hats, but if you want to bring them in, and emphasize the upbeat, and if you want to make it more uniform by bringing in a clap, you can hear how you get a bunch of different things out of the same limited voices. And that's why I have it set up this way, because I wanted as much flexibility of sound with the smallest amount of case that I could possibly have. So lots of sounds coming out of one little case was kind of the whole plan. Let's see. Amazing techno vibe. Thanks, man. Hey, what's going, unknown artist? Good to see you. Yeah, rest in peace, Oxy One. You saw that? Saw it just die. I saw the warning pop up a couple times, and I was like, I'll stop before it dies. And then I was like, no, I'll just keep going. Just keep having some fun. I should have charged them up before the stream, but I was jamming all day long and then decided to stream. So, unfortunately, nice jamming. Glad I caught the stream. Glad to have you, Sev One. That's cool with the Send Ghost. So is there another end of chain effects compressor? Anybody who's taken my class is laughing right now because they know exactly how I'm going to answer this, because we have this long discussion in my course about how end of chain compressors are, not only are they totally useless for live performance, but they are actually detrimental to live performance. I know that is a risky thing to say, and I'm going to get all of the compressor shit posters that are going to start freaking out on me. But the reality is compressors are great on individual channels with individual sounds. They're also great to glue things together in a production when you have a whatever 3 to 10 minute long bit of sound that is kind of sticking within a certain range, you can set a compressor to glue things together in there. But when you're playing live, what are your compressor settings set to? I say that as a hypothetical for the compressor shit posters out there. What would you set a compressor to for a 2-hour long live performance? Or even an hour long, or even a 20-minute long live performance? What settings? Because when I'm playing, as you hear, I'm bringing things in and out. I have high frequencies that are jumping out. I've got kick drums that are coming through more or less in other places. I'm bringing in new basses. I'm filtering. I'm adding effects. I'm taking away effects. So which of those groups of sounds do you set your compressor to? And if you set it too light, well, it's not doing anything for you. And if you set it too heavy for any given moment, it's going to squish that moment. You're going to lose the range, the dynamic range within your performance. So where do you set it so that it is functional? So because of that, I don't use any compressors. That was my very unpopular opinion way to explain that I don't use compressors in my live setup. The only compressor that I use is the Ghost has a built-in sidechain, and I have an attenuated multiple of my kick going to the sidechain right here, so that Ghost kind of wash, if I want, I can sidechain it to my kick in differing amounts. But that is the only compressor that I have in my system. And it's not to act as a compressor, it's to act as a sidechain to duck that wash of effects. And because that's kind of a messy batch of frequencies out there, it's to duck it out of the way of the kick so that I just make sure the kick comes through. But other than that, no compressor. Now, that's not to say that I don't have end of chain. The end of chain is, which you can probably see just the edge of up here just because of the way the screen is. There is an analog heat plus effects, which is up here. And that has basically 3 effects that are being used. The first is the heat itself, which is the saturation, so light saturation to fill out the frequency spectrum so that it doesn't sound thin when I'm playing, which is a key element to mastering, is adding saturation. So adding in light saturation makes your song sound, it gives it a higher LUFS value, so a higher perceived loudness without having to actually turn up the volume. So it can make your stuff sound louder without, that's the key to making it sound louder, not compression, no matter what people tell you. So saturate so that you can fill out the frequency spectrum and the perceived loudness will increase. So I have that in the heat. I'm also using a bit of overdrive, again, distortion, compression, or distortion, and adding harmonics to make it a higher perceived loudness. Then I have a high pass filter, which is in there as well. And that's set at about 25 Hertz is where the cutoff is. So it eliminates what's below 25 Hertz. And then I add some resonance, and that gives me a resonant boost between 30 and 50 Hertz. So it makes the kick boom more, the low end subs boom more. So when you're on a good system that has low end frequency response, you get a really fat, lovely low end. And then the other piece that I use is the bass mono, which is why I'm using the plus effects and not just the regular analog heat Mark II or Mark I, which you can use if you don't mind about the bass mono. I just like the bass mono because that allows me to put a cutoff, a crossover at about 200 Hertz. So everything below 200 Hertz stays mono, so I avoid phase cancellation when I'm playing live. and everything above that can kind of do what it's going to do. Most of my stuff is pretty mono anyway, with the exception of the effects. And so they can kind of freak out and move around in the frequency spectrum. And I don't have to worry about that too much. But the low end where I would really worry, and I want it to be, I don't want it to phase cancel, I mono everything below 200 hertz, which is kind of a duplicate of what I do for my mastering chain when I'm mastering in the box, is all of those things. Let's see what else. There was something else that I have in there. Oh yeah, because I add that little resonant boost in the low end, there's an EQ on this as well. And I just add a little bit of high to make up for the extra high that I added, or sorry, the extra low that I added with the resonance. So that way it keeps everything pretty well balanced. But yeah, other than that, that's it. It has a compressor. I use the compressor on it when I have it just on a single instrument and I'm tracking that instrument in, but I don't use it on the master, because master bus compression makes absolutely no sense to me for a live performance. If I had somebody next to me while I was playing live and their whole job was to adjust compressor settings based on whatever I was doing with effects and filters and resonance and bringing stuff in and adding new frequencies and adjusting this and bringing out instruments and bringing in instruments and adding resonance to a high pass filter, if every time I did that, they were adjusting the compressor settings, then just maybe there might be a reason to have a compressor. But that seems like a gigantic pain in the ass to me that I am not interested in doing. So, yeah, so that's my thoughts on end of chain compression for live performance. Feel free to torch me in the comments, but I'm happy to have that argument anytime anybody would like. Let's see, what else? We just have different compressor settings on different patches on the analog heat. Well, so here's the thing. That would work, and it probably does work, if you are performing tracks that are made in advance. Great thing about the analog heat is that you can save settings and you can change those with program changes via MIDI. So if you are pre-preparing your tracks and then you are performing tracks that have the exact same synths every time, the exact same settings every time, then you can make a preset for each track in the analog heat, and you can send a program change to it when you send the program change to your synths for changing up to your next track, and then it will adjust the settings for you. So that works on a track by track basis. However, I will still add a little asterisk that if you are doing any live performing while you're playing those pre-prepared tracks, meaning are you adding a filter with some resonance in order to bring in an instrument? Well, that filter resonance is going to increase the volume of those frequencies, probably trip your compressor, and probably squish down everything else. So do you want that? I guess is what I'm saying. So compressors work well if you're really not changing things much. But the way I perform live, again, I'm not pre-preparing tracks, so I can't do that. I can't have program changes and different presets by track because I don't know what I'm going to play when I start to play. So very difficult to do that. So because of that, it doesn't work for me. If you are performing stuff that is pre-done, it may work for you in a limited way. It will only work the way it's supposed to as long as you're not touching anything. But for me, that becomes very much like DJing, and it comes a little bit too far away from where I want to be from a live performance standpoint. I want to be playing live, improvising, writing on the fly in front of the crowd. And in that case, a compressor is just not in the cards for my particular thing. So there's that. Live play, compressor not needed, production definitely needed. 100%. Like I I'm not saying I don't use compressors. I totally use them when I'm producing. When I'm producing in the box, I generally put compressors, if I'm using them, I'll use them on individual tracks or on buses in order to have a particular effect on particular sounds throughout a particular track. But as far as master bus, I don't ever compress on the master bus at all, even in the box. But that's me. Everybody does their own thing. Limiter should be on the sound system, shouldn't it? Yes. I mean, basically, if I send out a clean, well-balanced, non-clipped signal at whatever level out my main that has a good amount of saturation, that the sounds are well thought out and they're not stumbling on top of each other, if I send that out to the house, all they should need to do at that point is to gain me up to the point where I'm basically hitting their limiter. And then their main house limiter is going to take care of any of that stuff that would have come out of here. And what's good about that is that there's generally a sound engineer riding that gain. So if I do something in my performance that gets significantly louder because of adding effects or new instruments or whatever, they can turn down the gain so that it doesn't hit that limiter and crush everything. So that's much easier for them to manage than individual compressor settings. And there's generally somebody there to do that. And if there's not, just stay below that maximum kind of headroom area and it will, you'll be fine. Let's see here. Oh, sorry, I missed the question before. Maybe at least a limiter while playing live. Well, I just answered that. Now, I wouldn't put a limiter personally, because again, I would be crashing into it all the time, or I would be staying so far away from it that it wouldn't be doing anything. So I would say on the house, sure, where there's somebody actually dealing with it, or just send things out that are low enough that they're not going to hit the limiter, and then they can gain you up at the end. Goldmaster has a limiter, and as I said before, it can sub bass to mono. Yes, it can. So if you are putting everything through something like the Goldmaster, you can do bass to mono just like you can in the Heat Plus effects. So it kind of depends on what you want. That Goldmaster doesn't do the other stuff the Heat does, so you would still need something that would do the saturation, the low pass filter, EQ. I think Goldmaster has EQ, if I'm not wrong. So it would do that part of it. So again, yes, 6 one, half dozen of another. You can use the Heat Plus effects. You can use a Goldmaster. You can use an Auto Boom. You can use Stimming's ridiculously expensive piece of kit that he has. But yeah, so anyway. What else? So no compressor, but still $900 to get closer to the sound. Yeah, I mean, again, I only use the Heat Plus effects when I'm playing on a really good sound system, because the reality is that most sound systems, you won't notice a difference. So it's not even worth it. But if you're playing on a really good sound system, like a Function One or a Void system that has really good subs with a really low frequency response, and it's really clear. And I would add also on top of that, if you're playing events like I am often, where you are, it's not exclusively live performers. So there'll be live performers and DJs. You don't want, when a DJ finishes playing and then you start playing, to have your sound just be loud but thin, which Modular can be really easily on a really good sound system. It will sound thin because it doesn't have that that perceived loudness. It doesn't have the extra saturation, because the DJ is playing songs that have each individually been mastered to a certain level so that they can keep them all about the same level. So if you want to have that same level of LUFS, of perceived loudness, you want to make sure that you can saturate on your way out. And again, that can be a saturator if you want to just run through that and have it be like a less expensive version of that. I like the Heat Plus effects because it saves me buying a saturation module, a high pass filter module, an EQ module, and a bass mono module, whether that's a Golden Master plus a filter plus a saturator, or whether that is, each individual model, or whether it's module, or whether it's different boxes. So yeah, it's $900, but it basically does the same as like $900 worth of modules. Or if the bass mono isn't so important for you, which it probably isn't in a lot of cases, again, unless you're on a really good sound system, you can just get an Analog Heat Mark I, which you can get for like $400, and you can still have the same exact saturation drive circuits that you have in this one. And so you can get yourself like 85% of the way there for less than half the price. So that's probably the most cost-effective way to do it, because that still gets you the high pass filter with resonance, it gets you the same saturation, and it gets you the EQ. It just doesn't get you the bass mono. So it gets you most of the way there for about $400. So that's the route I would go first before I went down any other road. Let's see here. Thanks a lot for these thoughts. I learned a lot from my workflow. Cool. Awesome. That's why I do these. Honestly, this is, I share my own personal experiences, hoping that I can save a lot of you the brain damage of having to do the trial and error that I've had to do in order to get this to where I am, and spending a lot of money on things I didn't need, like end of chain compressors and things like that. I've learned a lot over the years that I've been doing this, and that's what I teach in my course as well. If you want the long form version with 50 videos of how to do all these different things, plus one-on-one instruction, plus feedback on your individual performances, take the course, because it's a lot of fun. And there's a bunch of people in here. I know James, Wabbit, Craig, Ed. Did Ed? Yeah. Have all taken the course, so you can feel free to ask them. So it's not just me selling you something. They'll let you know what they learned from the course if you ask them, for sure. House will typically mono the bass as well. Yes. So that's another thing. That's another reason why the bass mono is less important, is because the vast majority of nightclubs, and this goes for nightclubs, this is not kind of showcase, more like setups, kind of like a band where it's all live performers and it's band performance. They generally, in those situations, do not mono the bass. Nightclubs, however, the vast majority of nightclubs are in mono anyway. And the reason being, the person close to stage on the right has to be able to hear the same track as the person over by the bar in the back of the room on the left. So they tend to mono everything so that you get the same sound all over the entire place. Otherwise, you would only hear the track that the DJ or the live performer is playing if you were standing right in the center of the dance floor all the time. So, little nightclub secret, most of them are mono because of that very reason. Let's see here. Exactly why I love it. Kind of is an all-in-one unit, fits right on top of your desk. Yes, totally agree. Course is great. Oh yeah, I forgot Paul was here as well. Course is great, totally recommend it. Thank you, I appreciate that, Paul. And if anybody in here is is interested in taking the course, and you want to ask the people who have taken the course, just hit them up on their channel or on their social media. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have. That's totally accurate. Recently did a back-to-back live set versus DJ, and if it weren't for the auto boom, my live beats wouldn't have matched up in terms of fullness and saturation. Yeah, and you hit it on your last word. The key is saturation. And I think for some reason, and this goes for production too, I just think that compression is something that is little understood and overly hyped as the magic wands that you can just wave over shitty songs and they will sound amazing if you just dial it in exactly right. And I can tell you from more than 20 years of production experience and 30 years as a DJ and the last 8 or so doing live performance, I can tell you that compressors are not magic. They won't fix bad songs. They can help if you've made a mess of something. They can help you clean up little messes. But once those little messes add up to a big mess, you can't put a compressor on the end of everything and then just have it sound good. Just doesn't sound good. So yeah, compressors are overhyped and unnecessary, particularly in live performance. I mean, other than to sidechain things like I mentioned, I can't think of any legit reason why you would want a compressor, much less need a compressor in a live performance setting. Now, saturation, totally, way more important. Bass mono, in some cases, yes. Low pass filter, yes. EQ on your main, maybe. But kind of depending on everything else that you're doing with it. But compressor, I just don't think it's the thing. But I could be wrong, but my experience tells me that I'm not. That this is what would be the best way for you to spend your money. Let's see. And like you mentioned, if you're playing with DJs, like you have to remember, they're not compressing a whole set. They are playing individual tracks that have been compressed at the individual track level or as a bus, for example, on drums, so that the main output is at a certain level so that with gain on your DJ mixer, you can make things match exactly and they sound about the same. If you come in with a live performance after that, you can't gain to the same level that they can, because your gain is just your top line volume, your decibel level volume. It's not your perceived loudness, your LUFS. So your perceived loudness comes from, it increases with saturation, not with volume. So having that saturation is really key to thickening up your whole sound, making it sound full so that it lines up with what DJs are playing. Rather than trying to just turn it up, then it gets piercing and it still sounds really thin. And that's because of the saturation. When I produce in the box, on my mastering chain, I have 2 different meters that I use all the time. One is a decibel meter for peak volume, and the other one is the Julian loudness meter, which is free. If you produce, grab it. It's awesome. It's free. And it gives you your LUFS. So you can see, when you add saturation, you can see your LUFS drop, but your perceived loudness, or your decibel volume stays exactly the same. And it's because you're making it louder as a perception to the ear, because there's more sound, there's more harmonics. Those harmonics and that sound just isn't higher volume. So yeah, do that in your live set, and it will make you line up and stack up very well with DJs. So let's see what we've got here. Love the detail. Sure, man. You know I'm all about the detail, about yapping on for hours and hours. But anyway, I think that's going to be it for the day. I just wanted to jump on here, show you a little bit about my workflow with sampling from the modular into the Digitakt, and then a little bit about how I'm using the live setup, and get into a long discussion about end-of-chain processing, which wasn't in the plans, but thanks for asking the question, because I think probably a lot of other people have the exact same question. So yeah, so if you want to do the course, there's a link in the description down below. The video course is available now, so if you sign up, you can start watching the videos immediately. Yeah, so you can start doing that part of the course immediately. If you want to do the full system with all the live stuff, the next cohort is going to be beginning the first week of November, and that's signing up now. Use Oxy20 as your coupon, and you'll save 20% off the list price of either one of those courses right now. The November course is filling up, so if you're thinking about doing it, don't wait till then. Sign up now and be ready going ahead, because I would love to have you on there. Helps me out a ton, and I love teaching, so I'd love to have you in the course. So anyway, thank you guys very much for joining in, and I hope you learned something today, or at least had a good time watching, or enjoyed the music, or whatever kept you from being too bored. But yeah, also one last thing, if you're going to be at the Amsterdam Dance event next month at ADE, I'm performing twice, once on the Sunday for the closing party at the Recycle Lounge Gallery. It's going to be an all hardware performance. So that's on the Sunday of ADE. I think it's the 20th. And then I'm also playing during the week, and I don't know the details yet, for the people from Books, the people that do the synth books. They have an area set up. I'll be doing a chat about improvised live performance and a performance at that as well. So if you're going to be there, hope to see you at both of those. If you see me when you're there, please come up and say hi. Let me know who you are. Introduce yourself. I love to meet people in person. And other than that, thank you guys so much for joining in, and hope to